History of the Donbass. Giuseppe Perri, CIERL, Brussels. If Ukraine is a borderland, as would suggest the etymology of its name and as shown by its position at the crossroads of peoples, civilizations and religions, the Donbass, which corresponds to the current territories of Ukrainian oblasts, provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk, and also a part of the Russian province of Rostov-on-Don, is the border of the border. Today, it has become the battlefield between Russia and Ukraine, between the Western Eurasia. The Cossack heritage. The massive immigration of the late 19th century, the industrialization, the peasantry urbanization, the social unrest and anti-Jewish pogroms of the period before the 1917 revolution, have spread the idea, still alive today, of a Donbass society unstructured and violent. The harsh and unhealthy climate, hotter than Palestine in the summer and colder than the winter in St. Petersburg, affirmed in 1908 a French engineer, inadequate water supply, conflicts between Ukrainians and Russians, but without triggering ethnic violence, have always characterized the region, a particular region, in revolt against the central government. It is imperial, Soviet, Russian or Ukrainian. Donbass has, at the same time, managed to play a political role that goes beyond its borders. Two general secretaries of the Soviet Union Communist Party, Khrushchev and Brezhnev, was the son of Russian immigrants workers in the Donbass. Some of the leading politicians of the post-Soviet Ukraine are also from the Donbass, as Yanukovych, the president overthrown by the revolt of Euromaidan, or from near Dnipropetrovsk region, as Yulia Tymoshenko and the former Ukrainian president Leonid Kuchma. The fact that the political history of post-Soviet Ukraine has been dominated by people from those regions of the southeast, while the politician praised by Western regions, Chernovil, a former Soviet dissident, died in a mysterious car accident on the eve of the presidential elections of 1999, provides an important key to understanding the events of recent months in Ukraine. The region of Donbass is named after the Donets River, which ends its course in the Don. These steppes, at the eastern end of the Ukrainian space, were part of dike poles, or wildlands. That is to say, regions, sparsely populated in the first centuries of the modern era, that were a transition zone between the rich Pospolita, the great Polish-Lithuanian state, the Black Sea and the Tatar Muslim world. They were, at the time, inhabited mainly by the Cossacks, peasant soldiers who had settled from the second half of the 15th century, especially to escape serfdom. The Cossacks defended these lands and in return enjoyed a certain freedom granted by Poland. They were not only warriors led by military leaders trained in the best schools, they were also the expression of the rebirth of a Ukrainian nation and a mass popular reaction against the harsh social domination imposed by the Poles. The Great Cossack Uprising of 1648, led by Bohdan Khmelnytsky, whose equestrian statue is now in the upper city of Kiev, was a real war of liberation of Ukraine. The Donbass, however, was not the epicenter of the life of the Cossacks, which took place mainly in the western Dikepol's current area of industrial cities. Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk remained sparsely inhabited until the mid-19th century. The Donbass was populated primarily through the discovery and early exploitation of coal deposits. This is why the region was the first in Ukraine to meet a considerable flow of immigration from Russia. Before the second half of the 19th century, there was in fact in Ukraine almost no Russian presence. In total, in 1897, the Russians, including Russified Ukrainians or Russian speakers, accounted for 11.7% of the entire population of the Tsarist Ukraine. The imperial census of 1897 included the Donbass in Ekaterinoslav, now Dnipropetrovsk, Gubernia, The Ukrainian historian Petro Lavrev estimated that the Donbass had a total of 700,000 inhabitants in 1897 and 2 million in 1920 and 7 million in 1959. In 1926, Russians constituted 31.4% of the inhabitants of the Donbass and two-thirds of them lived in cities. The Jewish presence in the Donbass has always been limited compared to other regions of Ukraine. They accounted for about 2% of the population in 1926, which were almost completely exterminated during the German occupation from 1941 to 1943, but today, they represent only 0.2%. At the time, there were a number of German rural settlements dating from the 18th century, but during the purges of the 30s and during World War II, Stalin ordered the deportation of all German communities, which have thus disappeared. Other ethnic groups, Bulgarians, Greeks, Belarusians, Poles, etc., were present in the region. Khrushchev, for example, who had emigrated when he was a child from Russia, in his memoirs recalls the skill of the Bulgarian farmers,